So, yesterday, Facebook lost almost 20% of its value. And I want to make a video about this because this is a company I've had my eye on for a few weeks now. For me, it's a poster child for the overinflated market that we're in right now. I'm sure they would prefer that I call them Meta, but I'm not going to. So I don't own any Facebook stock, and I'm not short Facebook either. And number two, I don't have a Facebook account, nor have I ever. So there might be aspects about their value proposition that I'm just completely missing. In any case, if it wasn't obvious already, this is not investment advice. I am an open source developer giving you my thoughts and feelings for free on the internet. Please take it for what it is. I think Facebook is fundamentally a doomed company, but why is that? Number one, no applicable innovation. Two, the moderation doesn't scale and the Fediverse is eating them alive. Number three, they have not managed to transition out of the dude, it's an app phase. Number four, targeted advertising doesn't really work. And number five, the regulatory environment is beginning to turn on them. When Facebook emerged on the scene, they were innovative. They offered something that was a better user experience than MySpace. There was a nice news feed that's tuned to your interests, and it was done without nearly as much advertising. MySpace probably imagined that they had an impenetrable moat because of the size of their user base, but it was not to be. I think people who joined MySpace had done so not long before, so switching to a new platform was not that difficult for them, and they had not become entrenched. Now, since its inception, Facebook has not managed to produce any real applicable innovation. They worked a lot on the Oculus technology, but virtual reality is complicated. A lot of people have been working on it, and there hasn't been a lot of progress. The forefront of what you might call virtual reality is in games. Now, if Facebook had bought a game company and released a title like World of Warcraft and then adapted that game to be more like the Facebook experience, they might have a shot. But cutting your teeth on Farmville and then thinking you're going to invent the virtual future, this is putting the cart before the horse. The second problem that Facebook faces is that moderation doesn't really scale. They seem to have had visions that they would be able to detect material that was against their community standards using AI, but the problem is that they're not dealing with some rude comments or misaligned individuals. What they're dealing with is state-level adversaries who are actively studying and attacking their moderation process. I'll break this down for you. Number one, a troll creates some awful racist meme, whatever it may be, it gets moderated, the troll comes back with a slightly less extreme version, moderated again, the troll comes back with an even less extreme version. Now, at some point, the moderators are going to have to decide what they're going to permit. Now, the troll has two endgames. One of them is that the moderators basically give up and let them spread propaganda unperturbed. The other is that the moderators become trained to see evil in everything and they start mistriggering and moderating obviously innocent posts. Now, these innocent posts may not be completely innocent, but if the person who posted it thinks it's innocent because they just copied it from another platform and they don't know the backstory, then they're not going to feel like the moderators are their friends. There was a political rally recently with Donald Trump Jr., and he said, "Raise your hand if you've been in Facebook jail." Now, this is the son of a former president we're talking about. This is not some obscure death cult or something. The idea that getting moderated on Facebook is a meme within a party that's like half the US population is a major problem for Facebook. Now, trying to use AI against a motivated state adversary is basically a joke. The adversary will very quickly study the AI, figure out how exactly to slip propaganda past it. So Facebook has taken to using people to moderate, which is basically subjecting them to a Clockwork Orange style psychological torture, which is very likely to lead them to some kind of political backlash because you just can't knowingly pay people to suffer long-term injury without eventually facing consequences. So if people are leaving Facebook, where are they going? Well, there are some centralized platforms which come and go, but the real destination, in my opinion, is the Fediverse. The Fediverse is a place where you can join whatever server or servers that you want. The servers are hosted on different physical computers with different operators in different countries, and they have different rules. The number of people per server is typically in the hundreds to low thousands, so there's a much better chance that the moderators can actually talk to the users and find out why they posted something. And if you find that you're not a cultural fit for the server that you're on, you can always just move or even make an alt account on another server just for posting your hot takes. If the culture of any two servers has an irreparable conflict, then they can just block each other or just limit discoverability. The key point is that on the Fediverse, moderation doesn't have to scale. The next problem that Facebook has right now is it's an app. You can talk about advanced AI and big data until you're blue in the face, but there really isn't any kind of magic there that any software dev team can't recreate. Now you might say, oh, but the network, and that's not really true either. People have lots of ways of talking with one another, and if one of them is full of ads, blocks some of their posts, but still can't manage to prevent their little cousin from getting radicalized, they're going to stop using it. MySpace thought they had an impenetrable network too, until Facebook took it out from under them. Facebook has a much stronger position because people have been using it for years, but that doesn't mean they're invincible. If you look at a company like Tesla, now whether or not they're overvalued, I'm not going to put a toe in that water, but if you buy a Tesla share, you're getting a piece of patents, battery know-how, factories, assembly line, contracts with mines, etc. You are getting access to things that make them able to make nice electric cars, which other companies are finding difficult. When you buy a share of a company like Facebook, Twitter, DocuSign, or Uber, the most valuable thing you're getting is probably the software development team. The rest, dude, it's an app. Now, the dream of targeted advertising is that you're going to find the exact demographic who will see your ad and then is going to 100% buy your product. The thing is that finding that kind of person is really hard, and finding a kind of person who is about to buy the product anyway is easy. So targeted advertising has been ripping off marketing teams by putting all the advertising on people who are already almost certain to buy so that they can get that golden click-through where the person finally does make the purchase. People know this is fake. You know that targeted ads don't really help you to find things that you want. They just pester you about things you already bought or creep you out by bothering you about things that you've looked at. Companies are starting to realize that this is fake, and there have been a few cases of companies switching back to old school advertising campaigns without any real change in revenue. The only people who are still drinking the Kool-Aid are investors, and it seems that they're starting to wake up as well. And all this data, which doesn't really help them, is about to become potentially a major regulatory liability. In Europe, the GDPR was initially not enforced that seriously, but this is beginning to change. The way the GDPR is written was subject to a certain amount of interpretation, and originally the standard interpretation was quite liberal, with processor agreements, legitimate interest, and consent banners being considered enough. Recent court cases in Austria and Germany have changed this direction significantly, and while Facebook was not the target of these specific actions, it is quite possible that they will be forced to delete much of the data which they're claiming to their investors is their secret sauce. Furthermore, Europe is looking to legislate interoperability in social media, effectively making it mandatory for social networks to join the Fediverse. It's still unclear how this law would take shape, but if it does, Facebook's business model would be in serious trouble. Over in America, things are a bit different. The political left in America is unhappy with Facebook because it's believed that poor moderation of Facebook led to the election of Donald Trump. On the political right, it's believed that Facebook over-moderates and is specifically targeting conservative opinions. This is a perfect example of how intractable the problem of at-scale moderation is. Even if you somehow manage to get everything right, you still lose because everybody's going to second-guess what you did and why. Whether the left stays in power or if the right comes back, there is a reasonably good chance that Facebook is going to be the target of monopoly legislation in the coming years. And finally, Facebook is just one of those companies which is just too easy to hate. If you're looking for political points by making someone a whipping boy, you want Zuckerberg. He's just so socially awkward. And I'm not saying that Facebook is actually a more evil company than, say, Microsoft, but Mark is the kind of person that you can ask him if the sky is blue and he looks guilty. In my opinion, Facebook is basically doomed. And what tipped me off was the name change. At this point, I would say any major company who's talking about NFTs and the metaverse probably has something they don't want you to see. And you know what it reminds me of is the Kmart Blue Light Special, which was a marketing campaign they shoved out in 2001 before they finally admitted defeat and filed for bankruptcy. I find it interesting that they chose the name Metaverse, which rhymes with Fediverse, the weak signal that's structurally stable enough to upend their whole business model. It's almost as if they were trying to somehow cover it up by typo squatting the name. It also reminds me of Twitter's ridiculous Blue Sky project, to invent the first ever decentralized social network, as if there wasn't already a network with 4.5 million users on 10,000 nodes in production today. But the same thing is true. If they admit that it exists, and more importantly, if they admit that it solves the moderation problem that's plaguing the centralized networks, then the only conclusion is that their whole business model is circling the drain. So they're practically forced to keep up the song and dance for pretending that they're still relevant because 2 + 2 = 5. Well, that's all I got. If you have any thoughts on the matter, chat me up on the Fediverse. My handle is cjd@mastodon.social. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.